Good morning. This is Haley Solomon with the North Carolina Housing Coalition. Thank you for joining us this morning for our housing call. And without further ado, I will turn it over to our Executive Director, Samuel Gunter.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to have you here this morning. Want to run through a couple updates. We're going to start off with updates from the coalition. So I want to remind everyone that this Friday, May 3rd, is our 5th Learning Collaborative session. You can register for it on in the call notes. You'll find it on the website as well. This session 5 is going to focus on housing barriers for justice-involved populations and individuals at risk of overdose. It's going to feature colleagues working within managed care who are working to support some of the most vulnerable citizens of our state. The topics are going to cover PCLI, the Transitions to Community Living Initiative, reentry supports and services for those exiting institutions, and other issues related to those seeking housing, and behavioral health supports. We're going to talk a little bit more about those reentry supports as well. There's some direction coming from the governor on that, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Also, May 17th, our final Learning Collaborative is going to, registration is going to be opening soon, but if you could save the date for May 17th, this is going to kind of wrap up all the different learnings that we've put out there on efforts to house some of the most difficult folks in our state to house, and lessons that we've learned along the way. Also want to remind everyone that the Bringing It Home Conference, which is happening June 4th and 5th in Raleigh, registration is live and it closes on May 17th. You can review the agenda on our website. I'd encourage you to register today. We're going to be talking a lot at that conference about housing narratives, about messaging, particularly with some headwinds that we're facing around the state. And I'm about to talk about one of them right now as I shift to federal updates. So as many of you, as we've talked about on this call for the last couple of weeks, last week the Supreme Court heard City of Grants Pass v. Johnson, which is a case that will determine whether or not people experiencing homelessness have a constitutional right to camp on public property when they do not have an alternative place to sleep. If the Supreme Court upholds the Ninth Circuit's ruling, localities won't be able to fine and criminalize people for not having homes and will instead have to focus on the root of the issue, access to safe, decent, and affordable housing. We're expecting a ruling by the end of June. If you work at that end of the continuum of housing, on the homelessness end of the spectrum, emergency shelter, rapid rehousing, support services, if you work in that world, I think it is really worthwhile to go back and listen to the oral arguments of this case. And some of the back and forth between the lawyers and the justices. Also, if you work in local government, I think it's also worthwhile to go back and listen to the oral arguments around this case and the ways that some of the justices were talking about homelessness as a category. Is it or is it not a protected class? How easy is it to think about getting out of homelessness? Because I think a lot of the narratives that came up in the oral arguments, both coming from the City of Grants Pass, as well as from some of the justices that were skeptical about the Ninth Circuit's ruling, are some of the narratives that we're seeing play out in communities across the state right now. So I think it's well worth going back if you spend time in this world and working on these issues at a public level in particular, to listen to the oral arguments. Again, at our Bringing It Home conference, we're going to be talking a lot about housing narrative and some of the narratives that we're seeing pop up not only in North Carolina but around the country that push the criminalization of homelessness over and against actual real solutions. So talking about how we can be better advocates at the local level, given the kinds of narratives that we're seeing. We have a couple of articles as well in the call notes on the Supreme Court case that focus around the Supreme Court ruling, but also some of the ways that communities across North Carolina are reckoning with housing and homelessness problems right now. So you can check that out on the website. Want to run through a couple of things at the state level. So the short legislative session has begun in earnest. We expect them to hit the ground running. They don't want to be in session long. It is a big election year with the president, the governor, most of the council of state all on the ballot. They want to get out campaigning. The other big item to know coming into this legislative session is they have announced that we have a $1.4 billion surplus over and against what they expected to have revenue-wise. And so there's going to be quite a bit of conversation about what happens to that money. There's some specific affordable housing items that are going to be coming up this legislative session. Some of you have seen the news out of Dare County and the $35 million that was allocated to Dare County for affordable housing development in the last legislative session, and how the county voted to send it back because of some of the strings that were accompanied the $35 million, including that it would bypass local zoning regulations. There is a meeting that took place that included representatives of Dare County, representatives from the NCGA, as well as Senator Tillerson Burr's office to talk about what solutions they could find in the short session to make sure that Dare County is able to use that money. So that's one of the items that's going to come up. We also saw the governor release his proposed budget. There were a couple of items in here that were particularly of note on the affordable housing front. One is that he's proposing to reallocate money that went to emergency rental assistance that was unused to the Housing Trust Fund. That's a significant amount. That was a piece of the governor's budget, as well as increases to the Transitions to Community Living Initiative program, TCLI, and an increase to the Workforce Housing Loan Program as well. So there's some significant housing funding in the governor's proposal. I make this caveat every time we talk about president's proposals or governor's budget proposals, that these are messaging documents, right? It is the General Assembly or it's Congress that allocates the funding, and even if, say, a governor of one party has supermajorities in both chambers of the same party, it is rare that executive's budget proposal goes through. It's got to go through a long process, but this sets the tone for what's coming. There are other items in that budget, including significant pay raises for teachers and so on, that are of note. But on the housing front, it is that transfer from unused emergency rental assistance funds to the Housing Trust Fund, as well as increases to TCLI and the Workforce Housing Loan Program, among others that are of note. There are several local updates. We had allocations at the local level toward affordable housing last week in both the city of Asheville and the city of Charlotte. You can read more about that in the call notes. I am going to leave. I'm going to end this call a little earlier today than we normally do. But there are a number of other items in there around local housing policy news and reports and webinars to put on your calendar, as well as events. There's like an NC WAN happy hour coming up, things like that are on there that you're going to want to take a look at. So if you take a look at the call notes, you can find those on our website, and that can point you in the right direction. But again, the big news this week is a reminder: make sure you're registered for Bringing It Home. We're excited to be back in person, really excited about the keynote speaker and the lineup for the workshops and the stuff that we're going to be talking about. We have 2 learning collaboratives, one coming up this Friday and another one on the 17th. And also, if you have a chance, listen to the oral arguments from the Supreme Court case last week on City of Grants Pass v. Johnson. It is well worth your time. And as we head into this General Assembly, this short legislative session, be on the lookout. We're going to be being down there a lot this short session, especially as we're looking at surplus and see how we can make those transformative investments for affordable housing here in North Carolina. Y'all have a great week, and we will see you next time.